We'll now move on to our next session, ladies and gentlemen. And this one definitely is the buzzword that everybody's talking about. And Dr. Kim had also touched upon slightly as we spoke about Bitcoin cryptocurrency. Well, the next one is titled aptly as the evolution and the future of crypto and blockchain technology, of course. So we'll be deep diving into it, and I'm sure that many of you are intrigued with this one. So let us go ahead and quickly get it started right away. I'd like to first of all invite Mr. Anoush Bhasin, who's the founder, Quagmire Consulting, to kindly join us in a chat with Ms. Kavita Gupta, founder and GP for Delta Blockchain Fund, to kindly join us and share their views and their insights on the evolution and the future of crypto and blockchain. Over to both of you. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Am I audible? Yeah.
I think it is. It
Say
is.
something?
I think it's
Yeah,
working. Yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Anoush, and a very quick introduction about myself. I'm a chartered accountant. I've been working in the crypto space for the past 4 or 5 years. I was one of the first few CAs who started telling investors and traders it's okay to be dealing in crypto. It's okay to be selling, booking profits, and it's actually okay to base your career in crypto. And yes, fast forward to today, I'm sitting with the lovely Kavita Gupta. Quick introduction about Kavita as well. She's a dear friend. But first of all, she is one of the most well-known personalities in the crypto space globally. She's put India on the map. She's a visionary. She was working with Ethereum's venture arm called Consensus Ventures earlier on. Then she's also a media personality. She runs FinTech TV, which is a tech media platform based in New York. And finally, she's betting on the blockchain ecosystem now through Delta Blockchain Fund. And I'll leave it to you, Kavita, to introduce yourself.
I think, Anush, you have done such a wonderful job. The only thing I add is I also have the opportunity to teach at Stanford beyond Bitcoin class, working with the undergrad students to see how they want to come into the space. But the introduction which you gave about yourself, I remember back in 2017, we started Consensus India, and one of my colleagues from that time, actually Karan is here, who is now the India head of DYDX, which is very amazing. So I remember having this conversation in our office and saying, we want people to deal in ethers and Bitcoin, and we do believe in the global power of the currency. But who in India is going to put the framework of how to tax it? And I think you have been one of the first few people to do it. So before we go and you asking me questions, I always wanted to ask you this. Let me ask you this question. As a CA, which is a very structured approach of 50-year-old system of how are you taxing, how you're doing financial derivative products, when you got into the space, I don't think there was any framework for taxing crypto. For the longest time, I didn't know any framework.
Yeah, that's correct. We've been lobbying with the income tax department to launch a framework for some time now. Also because there were just so many investors, there was so much income that had to be reported but wasn't being able to be reported in the right manner. What we did back then, since when regulations or when a tax framework didn't exist, was try and disclose it as appropriately as possible, so that at least we are bringing it onto the books, we are disclosing it. If the Central Board of Direct Taxes has questions, they can ask us questions. We have the documentation, we're very happy to answer. But at that time, it was the most appropriate or closest to most appropriate disclosure. Now that the government has come out with tax regulations, although some of the tax regulations are difficult, they're challenging the ecosystem, but
Yeah.
at least they're giving that comfort level to taxpayers and investors that you can get into
I will
this.
hold you right there because somebody who has worked globally on how to regulate crypto, one of my biggest pinpoint, and let's start from there and then we can go back into a very basic concept which still we get asked for what is blockchain and what is crypto. But before that, how do you tax a commodity or a currency without legalizing it?
It's interesting. The government doesn't need to legalize it. The government can tax any income irrespective of its legality because the government has a right to deduct that much percent of
It's
their
not
income.
about the right. I believe So, as a crypto believer, I am very, very happy to pay taxes. And I am till it's not 50%, 60% and taking away all the brain power I'm using. But then I expect when I pay those taxes for the government to give me a very conducive atmosphere for me to do my business. So, doesn't that go hand in hand?
Ideally, it should. We should have a very conducive ecosystem towards this entire industry in general, especially because the government is opposing the highest tax bracket on this as a flat rate. However, I think the Indian government is taking its time to understand this space. It's a very complicated space, and the regulator is usually playing catch up. So while we're probably trying to regulate exchanges now, we are at a level where we're looking at decentralized exchanges, we're looking at DeFi, we're looking at yield bearing assets on protocols. So it may take some time for the government to get there. But yes, I do agree, absolutely. There has to be some sort of a sandbox, or there has to be some incentives that the government is providing, because if they are taxing this ecosystem in such a manner, then we should be able to bear the rewards of it as well.
Yep. Well, with that, India and taxation, let's move back to your
Okay.
script.
Now switching roles, I'm the moderator and Kavita is the speaker. So great, Kavita, today's agenda is basically evolution of blockchain technology and crypto and the future as well. Let's start with your journey and how it's evolved since you've been involved since 2015 with Ethereum's venture arm. Can you walk us through how the space has evolved since then?
I actually got into the space back in 13. It was at that point at a very micro level of mining Bitcoin, not at the industrial level of mining, but as an individual using the same hash rate going and doing it at home, which got me believe into something. And I used to work for World Bank and IFC till that point. And I remember my days when I was living in Africa in Kenya with the World Bank, and between Kenya's bank account of World Bank and Tanzania's bank account of World Bank, both verified with international organization, it would take us 7 day to 9 day to settle the payment. And if you drive from Nairobi to uh, to Zanzibar or to Dar, it will take me around 14 hours maximum to maximum if it's really bad. So the joke used to be that you put cash in your in your car and drive instead of waiting for the banks to settle. And I think the first time when I started looking at Bitcoin, that was what I felt like is the power of global currency, because I would send Bitcoin to somebody and suddenly it was settled right there. And of course, we didn't have the technology what we have today to convert it into exchanges and easier way to move it into stable coins, etc. But that's when I started believing that this has the power. But then when Vitalik wrote Ethereum white paper and started writing about smart contracts application, then as a computer engineer, the idea that you can use the technology which is not limited to just fintech, but from your supply chain to your identity and voters fraud to anything and everything in this world is what got me into the space. And so even though I continued to have my own company and then ran investments for Eric Schmidt Family Office, I kept on investing into the space from what 40 cents each to all the way today. And believe me, the technology today which are coming out in the space are still the tip of the iceberg.
Great, great. I think one term that we use interchangeably with blockchain is cryptocurrencies. However, they're quite different. Blockchain existed much before cryptocurrency came about. So
Actually, the other way, right? In respect to practicality, because blockchain as a decentralized database concept has been there theoretically for 20, 30 years. There's no nuclear science to it. It's very simple. Today you have a database which is on your RAM in your laptop or your desktop, or you download it in your database. The decentralized database says that you just don't have a local storage system. It is decentralized. You cannot manipulate it. You cannot change it without having a timestamp associated with it. So even if you go back to the origination of search ecosystem by Yahoo or Google and everything, the core concept of having multiple entities which you cannot change, let's say on Google search results on internet, because multiple people have that timestamp document. That's where that comes from. But I think doing it using, I think the reason blockchain industry gets so much coverage for it is the cryptocurrency valuations.
Right. Yeah. I think crypto is what brings the spice
The
to
sexy,
yeah.
fancy term with a lot of money involved.
Right.
Yeah.
However, there's always been a perception that blockchain is good and crypto is, and blockchain can be used without crypto. So I'd like to understand your thoughts about, can blockchain actually survive and thrive if we exclude the crypto aspect from it?
It can. Depends upon what is your use case and is like what do you want to use. If you want to use it for identity verification, you don't need crypto. If you want to use it for supply chain system, you don't need crypto. But if you want to use it for settlement of your banking, international banking, then you do need crypto. Now, even to make it much more government friendly from crypto, which has its own volatility, because see, at the end of the day, I don't blame it on crypto, I blame it on human behavior, including yours and mine. You take gold, you take a rock, which is pretty much like diamond. If it has a value and somebody is going to go and speculate and have a supply demand curve to it, anything and everything, it becomes speculative. Do you remember when the economy, I don't know, you are younger than me, maybe you don't, but then when the economy was closed, even a Reebok shoe had a whole secondary market to it, right? A Levi's jeans had a secondary market to it. So what are you going to do? Are you going to go to a stock exchange and say it's a currency or a commodity?
Yeah, that's a great example, Kavita. Thank you for bringing that out. Now, flipping the question, can we do without crypto? What impact has crypto had since you got into this space, in terms of being a speculative asset, or in terms of actually having a socio-economic impact in countries like Africa, Latin America, where you can actually save on, say, 6 to 7% remittance cost. You can save on 2 or 3 days worth of time to make a remittance. So how do you see the impact of crypto in this space?
So I think I'll divide it into three industries. Crypto, which is as a currency, which is Bitcoin, Ether, anything which is accepted globally with enough liquidation in the market. Then I'll put token economics. So token like Polygon tokens or any other company tokens, a product token. And then I'll put technology at the base. So if I talk about crypto and taking your example, I think you and me are blessed to be associated with countries like India and US or UK, where the chances of us waking up and realizing your whole country has failed and your currency has failed, and now getting one egg or a liter of milk is going to cost you $1,000, it's very minimal, right? But I was living in Nairobi when I woke up back in 2007, and the whole economy failed, you know. And people who woke up with $100 worth of money literally needed $5,000 worth of money to buy the same thing. So then, how do you know that people who are in the power making decisions for you actually representing your interest? It's not a global phenomena. We are very blessed to be in the countries where there is a sort of stability associated with our financial economy. So crypto becomes the currency for your saving and to have a life living. For an example, cryptocurrency adoption is huge in Middle East. It's huge in Latin American countries like Honduras, Venezuela, and a lot of conflicted oriented countries, because if a person needs to move, there are official Bitcoin ATMs on the border of Colombia and Venezuela. Because when the people from Venezuela move to Colombia, they convert their Bitcoin into peso and start a new life with the same support system, which you can't give them as an asylum, right? So yes, there is a lot of benefits from remittances to getting defrauded on remittances, international transfers. A country decides, oh, this is a journalist, let's freeze the bank account and let them be on our mercy. Like, there's a lot of freedom associated with it. Similar freedom when it came to the company tokens, the concept for doing ICO slash token launches were always that you do not want to be dependent upon the so-called Silicon Valley gang to raise money for your company. You want to be democratizing the impact of raising money, creating product, and proving your point. So a company being in India, creating a next generation product either can be dependent upon VC or can decide a larger group of people to say, this is what we are building, you will have a value associated with it day zero, let us do the token launch. So the real idea started from there. Now, did fraud happens there? Of course happened, but how much fraud and hawala has happened with cash till today? So what does that mean? We should take out cash completely from the ecosystem. You know, the bank account still gets frauded with so many credit card frauds. What do you do? So there will always be a bad actors, but that doesn't take away the reason and origination of things.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kavita. I think one central point between the two types of use cases you brought down was a central institution getting involved. Whether it's with payments, it's the banks. Whether it's with fundraising, it's a centralized exchange or it's a regulator. Centralized institutions like the government in many countries have made it difficult for crypto adoption, including India. How do you think governments are looking at this globally? And if we can also patch in your thoughts about Indian regulations and how can the Indian regulators probably learn from what's happening globally in terms of regulatory adoption and developments?
I think specifically for India, if I start from there, I think the fear comes from certain rules and regulations, and I'm not an expert in it, but whatever has been my understanding of trying to understand why we behave the way we are, like, we are not 100% open, but we are not 100% closed. So, what are the reasons which are stuck in the middle? And I think we had this old FEMA law about $250,000, which is the maximum international currency which can leave by an HNI from the country or an institution. And I do understand the root of that, that in 70s, as a country, we did need a lot of foreign exchange to support our imports. But I think the ecosystem has completely changed. India is no more a third world country. India has so many new mechanisms of attracting international exchange to the country. We still have more export than import, and we do need a big reserve. But then if you start hampering the innovation in the country, then we're going to have an impact of some of the top blockchain companies which are very homebred in the country had to leave the country and go for better jurisdiction. When they leave, they not only leave the money which they can easily pay in income tax, because nobody is complaining about it till, as I said, give us conducive atmosphere to do business, but also jobs, also the best brains, and also the credibility of that ecosystem. Without naming some of the amazing companies which the whole world is really proud of Indian founders, but I think we have let go of a billion-dollar economy, existing billion-dollar economy, not the future billion-dollar economy, and the economy which would have attracted more foreign exchange reserves to the country. So, uh, should we legalize it and tax it? I think we should. Is there a way we need to figure out to track how much of this money goes abroad and for what reasons? Yes, we should. And maybe we can figure out a way to be able to do it. Is there a fear that you can use a decentralized wallet and move the money anywhere? It's a two side. As a crypto believer, that's the power of crypto, and that's why I'm really excited about it. But for Indian citizens, if India wants to move it in a certain way, but find a balance between the control and the freedom, that would be an amazing place for the technology evolution to happen. Now, something very interesting we were talking just before we came on stage is UK's today's regulation about adopting stable coins in pound and allowing people to convert their cryptocurrency into stable coin and make payments everywhere. So in the future, I can go and buy a train ticket using a private company's originated stable coin, but in pounds. So is that stable coin equivalent to CBDC? No. because I can still take the GBDC stablecoin and can use it in US, can use it in other parts of the world, at least on the blockchain. But the Chinese yuan stablecoin is only for the Chinese government system. And that's where I feel like you are again putting a limitation, because if there's an Indian stablecoin, it's amazing for India, but then how is it different than Paytm or Bharat Pay or basically any of that? Is just basically a digital inclusion of digital rupee, but that has nothing to do with crypto.
Right. I think capital flight has been one of India's largest concerns when we talk about crypto. And as you rightly mentioned, CBDC, which is a central bank digital currency, has been one of the aspects that the RBI has been advocating for a while. In a closed door economy such as India, where we are very concerned about our foreign exchange reserves and where we can't freely convert to other currencies, a CBDC may just be another means as UPI or Paytm or any other way to exchange value. Is this the right solution for a government to say that we'll launch a CBDC, but we'll prohibit other cryptocurrencies, and that is how we move ahead with crypto adoption in India?
I mean, on the global level, it doesn't make sense because CBDC is basically Indian denominated digital adoption, right? So if I am already using UPI payment system, how is that different than CBDC? So if somebody is an Indian citizen and try to go and pay INR denominated digital currency in US for to buy something, that's just not going to work. That's like your international credit cards, that it will still pay in USD, but at the back end it's calculating it your local currency. So how is it different? So does it solve interstate intra payment system? It does. But you don't need really CBDC for that, right? You can just do it still, as I said, with UPI payments across the country. So the whole concept, so we are saying, hey, let's just give it a fancy name and let's use it. But we are taking away the whole reason behind why cryptocurrencies are adopted as a global currency. So
Absolutely. Thank you, Kavita. I think only if CBDCs can be exchanged freely do they make sense. And as long as the Indian foreign exchange barriers are shut, a CBDC may not be that much of a revelation in the entire crypto ecosystem. Kavita, a very popular topic these days is Indian exchanges and custody practices and possibly global liquidations impacting consumers' funds on Indian exchanges. I would like to understand your thoughts about what's going on and possibly what the government can say to Indian exchanges to improve custody practices.
I think custody is a very, very important part of as an individual owning a cryptocurrency or as an institution owning a cryptocurrency, right? I mean, it goes back to you owning a cash. Can you lose your cash? You can easily lose your cash, right? So it's very similar to that custody. I remember there was a time in India when like banks were defaulting, right? So that's equivalent of your institutional custody. And banks shutting down and all the money going with it used to be in 70s and 80s a very normal generic thing around the world, not just India. So I think we are at the stage at crypto where we do have a sophistication of custody available with various products outside there and the security associated with it. Has the Indian exchanges from day zero employed it? No, they didn't. In fact, there was a time only 2 years back, without naming some of the top exchanges of today, did not even have a basic Web 2 and Web 3 security from just the cyber security arms. But has it gone better as more the VC money came and the whole diligence process became better? Yes, it has. So if you look at today's exchanges, the idea that any of the top 3 or 4 exchanges have got hacked and lost clients' money, that has not happened in my knowledge as much as I know. I have never heard any of those stories. Small players, yes. But then that as an investor, you have to take a call where your confidence is. Um, when it comes to custody, I think there are international custody practices which has been set by Fireblock, which has been set by Encourage, which has been set by bunch of institutional custody platforms, which has to be used. Now let's come to liquidation, which is the hottest topic because of Three Arrow Capital, because of Celsius, because of various other DeFi protocols, lending, borrowing protocols going. And one of the Indian lending product which slash exchange being illiquidated. I think what's happening out there is very similar to what happened during the MBS crisis in 2008 and 9 in US, which had a global impact. It was a CFI crisis. Today we are looking at a DeFi crisis, right? But the basic principle remained the same, that you have basically lended more than what you have borrowed. You just have not managed your balance sheet. You have not balanced it. And the crypto prices went down at the same time. So when it went down, the delta increased, and now you just cannot balance it anymore. So I think within India, retail customer suffering is a negative thing, because that will make Indian government to be more wary of making rules around it. But I would take a step back and I say, did we shut down all the banks when the mortgage-backed crisis happened? Did we shut down all the banks when the inflation was so high that the interest rates, especially for the MBS, went up? No, we didn't. But we came up, created better rules, and went about it. So the exchange, which we both don't want to name and had this liquidation issue in the country, of course didn't do it right by the risk compliance, but doesn't mean that is what the whole industry is. I want to underline again and again and again, if the whole world is losing $8 billion and there is 150 to $200 million loss in a small exchange with a global system, that's a bad act. And we should look at how to make it better, but that doesn't, it's not a reflection of the whole industry. And the other exchanges who didn't lose a penny there.
Sure. We shouldn't extrapolate one bad actor or one bad event to mean poorly on the entire industry. Thank you for that, Kavita. Let's move on to Delta.
But before that, it's also very funny. The same retail customers who wants government protection today was not asking for government protection when they were putting their money to get 20% APY. So I also feel like that in this thing, the onus also has to be on the retail investors, investors like you and me. If we think that something is giving you what doesn't make sense by a CFI system and has to go in DeFi and go for higher earn, then we also have to accept the risk.
I think you're right. We have to ask the right questions. If we're getting a 20% APY, where is that institution lending the money and how secure is it? I think that's one of the most important things every educated investor needs to start doing. Let's move on to Delta, Kavita.
Yep.
What use cases are you passionate about for crypto and blockchain? What is Delta betting on? And how can Indians in general get involved more in this space, and where do you think this space is headed? I know it's a lot of questions, but just pack it into where do you think this space is heading and what is Delta betting on?
I think every bearish market, this is my third, I think this is your second. Every bearish market in crypto is a huge opportunity for tech to be built and be used and take us out into the bullish, towards the bullish market. I think this is an excellent time to understand the gap for DeFi. You talked about custody, you talked about risk parameters, so risk analytics. It's a new world with multi-chains. You have multiple chains. Ethereum is no more a monolithic chain to be used in the ecosystem. You have Ethereum, you have Tezos, you have Cardano, you have like Solana, you have a lot of chains, and then a lot of layer twos on top of it with Polygon and Starkware completely leading the gap. I feel like moving assets across all these chains, not only doing analysis on them from risk perspective, from the profit perspective, but also how do you make it easy for the adoption to the billions without them trying to understand the fiction of having a wallet, having NFTs on top of it, having the contract set up. I think this is the time to see and build up blocks for the adoption from UX UI at the front end all the way at the back end of the interoperable layers. And that's what even at Delta, what we are doing. We are really focusing on a lot of infrastructure. We are focusing on interoperability infrastructure, different layers from your decentralized identity all the way to UX UI. analytics associated with the whole platform, and what are the products which is going to be adopted by the masses, whether that's going to be in the frame of metaverse or NFT or DeFi protocols or just having phones. Like, I feel like it has to be as easy as a wallet, that it's on your iPhone, you have an app, and you don't care and you don't know which layer you are on. It just gets the job done. And I think that's what we see the future. And the funny thing is, even though we are talking about Indian regulations and where does it go, with respect to technology, India is one of the top 5 countries which has come out with respect to entrepreneurship in the blockchain ecosystem, the amount of funding the founders are getting, and not just within India but globally. When I look at my portfolio, geographically we can say we have only 12% investment in India, but if I look at Indian origin founders, I think 35 to 38%. And that's very fascinating. India is right now above Israel with respect to funding and the amount of entrepreneurial talent in the existing blockchain industry.
It's great to know that, Kavita, and thank you for those insights. We have about half a minute or so, so I'd like to open it up for questions. Would anybody like to ask Kavita a question? Oh, there we have. Uh, can we get him a mic?
I don't.
No, let me.
You want to give yours?
So, my question is a little philosophical. Why? Because speaking more macro, if you were to just take it Web 2, internet is actually consumed a lot of the media industry. You look at Napster, it came with file encryption and sharing over the internet, but then it was banned by the US government. Then, you had these blockbuster kind of CD renting through stores, physical stores kind of a business, which also died down at the hands of Netflix. And I believe every one of you here is somehow kind of using Netflix, right? So I personally feel that the internet is coming after money now as Web3. And eventually it's a Pandora's box with a lot of technical and technological innovations, which is, you and me cannot do anything about it. Maybe not even the government. So why is that the fact, if you had the opportunity to ask somebody in the government why we cannot embrace crypto like some of the other advanced countries in the world, let's say to name a few like Singapore or maybe Dubai, who have certain regulations around it, but yes, they're very open-handedly embracing it. Why is it that the government, cannot really embrace? Because eventually, I personally feel that India is not responsible for the inflation which is happening across the world. All the inflation is happening because of the money printing in the US and the poor policies and the high debt to GDP ratios of these governments, for which India is also bearing the brunt. Now, but if we are so bullish on Indians, why can't we be bullish on India also by actually somebody from you guys, going ahead talking to the government as to why don't we open up this Pandora's box fully with, I understand there might be a risk of capital flight, but eventually, if we embrace it today, we will be more bullish on India, not only bullish on Indians. So that's my philosophical question.
I think it's a philosophy, not a question, first of all. And I think some of the points you said are right, but you also have to remember Napster got banned not because they had encryption. They got banned because they didn't have the IP rights from the music industry, right? So the reason Apple Music was successful and Napster got banned because Steve Jobs took it on himself to go and figure out the way to have IP rights and create a whole division about it. Same thing as we take up any other example. Of course, it takes time for it to grow, and it takes time for every participant to understand. Global economy, especially European Union, is ahead than anybody else to understand the regulations around crypto. Even taxations around it. Of course, Portugal has different regulations, Spain has different regulations. Dubai, whether they do not take the side about crypto, they do allow entrepreneurship to really come and really foster there. So if I would have to ask a question to somebody in government, my question actually would be that why don't you create a boundary which is good enough to have innovation and entrepreneurship to continue, and people who are ready to pay taxes to actually stay in the country and build the products can have an opportunity to do, instead of asking me to pay taxes and announcing it to you that I have crypto, but I can still go to jail because I did pay taxes to you, which makes me feel that I should hide something when I'm ready not to hide it. So I think my question would be, can I have one way or the other for me to decide where do I really belong? Because losing the most talented, educated people are not the way to build biggest economies in the world. And I have to underline that though, US is also right now with all the SEC crackdown on blockchain and crypto facing exactly the same question. Because one of the biggest things which we just discussed in one of the conferences at Consensus in US was, why is Coinbase suffering this much and not FTX? And the obvious answer is FTX chose Bahamas to build the company and Coinbase decided to go down the laid-by path of SEC, of going IPO, and got crushed down because of the government regulations. So I think US is also facing the same problem. So I think Bahamas, Dubai, UK, Portugal are the people who are becoming a superpower because of it.
I really hope to have India included in that list sometime soon, and I think that's what everybody hopes as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all the time we had today. If you have any questions, please do feel free to connect with Kavita or myself if I can answer anything. Kavita, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to learn from you and to learn about your experiences. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gupta. Thank you, Mr. Bhasin, for that intriguing talk there. Yes, definitely, blockchain and crypto does come along with a lot of debatable topics at this point of time. So, we will continue the debate, but after this hot one, let's go ahead and take a short break, fill in our tummies, and be right back at 2 o'clock after a lunch break when we continue with lots more discussion on crypto, blockchain, and much more in this FinTech Festival. On the other side at 2 o'clock, please. Thank you very much.